That's me. Great.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, I just want to stress, this is a little PS, that physically, and I mean, my basic health is very good. And I have, I feel good being in my body. You know, it's not like I'm accumulating illnesses or anything. It's just that my psyche has shifted. So, yeah. Great. Thank you for listening. So I think Arabella just finished her check-in. Really short.
It was telepathic.
It was telepathic, right? We all got it. Great, Arabella, that sounds wonderful. Well, being in silence sounds wonderful, so I'm jealous. But I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it at Christmas or somewhere along there. I'm looking forward to that.
Sounds good.
So, I think, oh yeah, there was that thing about fixing the world. Is that what we were going to do? Do we still have enough time to well, probably a half hour we'll do it.
I have something I want to ask you all about that I was reading the Muladhara book. What's the
Bihar?
Yeah, the Bihar. Yeah. So I was reading that book this past week, and I don't have it in front of me. I could go get it, but it was saying something. So I guess I want to talk about chakras a little bit. I was reading about the root chakra, and in the book they were mentioning that in the animal kingdom, something like the root, I'm not going to get this right, but maybe one of you will recall it. The root chakra in humans is the third eye, something about reversed in the animal kingdom. Does that, I could go get the book, but does that ring a bell for anybody?
Well, I'd say get the book because I'd like to know the title of it, if it's the one I'm thinking about or not.
Okay.
I think it's a pretty small one. I've got it downstairs if Liz doesn't. Oh.
Okay, got it. It's Mulabandha, the master key.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking about.
This
one. Yeah. I think that's the Mulabandha.
Let me find the little, and anyway, I pulled it out last week because I was telling Mark today that I'm concocting a chakra class that I want to I want to start in 2021, and like with how, of course, it relates to what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
So stuff with COVID, stuff with white body supremacy, systemic racism. Like, I just wanted to kind of overlay all these wild lenses and just overlays on the chakras and see what happens.
Great.
Cool.
Goodness gracious. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Muladhara chakra marks the interface between two modes of evolution, as it is the lowest chakra in man, but the highest in animals. Man therefore stands one octave higher than the animal.
Hmm. Yeah, Swami Rama always said that animals are governed by instinct,
Right.
and humans are not. I mean, partly have to deal with instinct, but we have other levels of consciousness. This is despite Walt Disney, um,
So much
where
is.
well, because I think that was really disparaging of animals to make them humanoid. Because first of all, they're not humans, but secondly, they have qualities that humans lack, and it's sort of like, well, if we're going to understand it, it has to be like us. That is a very common way of people dealing with the world. Well, if it's not like me, then it doesn't make any sense. So they make the animals talk like humans and think like humans. And fortunately, they don't, or they would have destroyed the world long before we had our shot at it. So, so I think that that's not to disparage animals. It's just to say they're doing a different thing, and we should watch them and learn from it.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I wasn't remembering that the sense there is smell. Like, the book kind of
Yeah.
goes, yeah, that it's smell, and that the book goes on to say the muladhara, it has a direct link with ajna chakra situated in the middle brain. Thus, by stimulating this center through mulabandha, we also awaken our intuitive faculties associated with the third eye.
Mm. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how authoritative I would consider this book, but it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
That because certainly the Muladhara is our relationship really with Gaia,
Mm-hmm.
and the energy that comes up from the earth
Mm-hmm.
that the energy that we send down into the earth and what we get back up from the earth, and the third eye is actually a light perceiving organ.
Yeah.
Did you hand me my water bottle that's down there? So, I mean, I there's something there, connection that I can't quite articulate,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean the the pineal gland is I think it has I think animals have a pineal gland too. Thanks. I'm sure they do.
The prostate is a gland, yes?
The what?
Prostate is a gland.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm sort of thinking about those two glands.
Yeah, but the prostate really has more to do with the second chakra than the
Chakra,
first chakra.
yeah.
The Yeah, and the first chakra has to do with the anal glands,
Yeah.
which have to do with the sense of smell, for sure. And I don't know what effects the sense of smell has on the pineal. But that's an interesting question that might be not fun to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the sense of, I mean, one of the symptoms of coronavirus is that people lose their sense of smell.
Right.
Yeah.
And taste.
And taste, yeah.
Right.
So, Rudaji, I don't know that this will ring any bells, but do you remember that Kundalini Vidya book?
Oh, yes. I have a copy right here.
I'm looking at it, and when you were talking about the muladhara to Ajna, however we want to say it, I remembered like all of the various, she really maps the various risings of Kundalini, and that sometimes it goes around things and through, and so I was looking at about 4 or 5 different ones, I don't know, but it does look like maybe there are, you know, there's the knot, the granthis and all of that, but I'm curious about some of that. I mean, we don't have to go into it now, but I'll probably look a bit to see if she has much to say about it.
Right.
Since that, like the Bihar school is so much on Kundalini and
Mm-hmm.
Right.
but I'm rusty.
A thought that came up for me when we're talking about animals and people. What I remember when I was in Tibet was that the people feel like dogs are reincarnated monks. And that so it was really important to feed the dogs. Now in India, of course, they do control them quite differently, but in Tibet, it was an interesting idea.
My voice is giving me trouble. But I do remember, who read the Kali's Odiya? Yeah. Wait, do you remember the dogs in there?
Dogs,
Yeah.
crows, boy, there was all kinds of things in that one.
Yeah. And the dogs were former associates of the teacher who was teaching them Sanskrit. And she would say, well, get those dogs out of here, they're smelly. And she'd run them off, but they were really her prior associates in another life. Swamiji made some remarks to me about people and dogs and the relationship and it's like especially sexual interactions between people and dogs would often flip someone to being reincarnated as a dog.
So having sex with a dog would mean that you were reincarnated as a dog? I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Or am I?
Well, no, you still have an opportunity. You're not missing.
That's not what I mean, but I wasn't sure if that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right.
Well, it's funny too because people are having a hard time getting dogs right now. Like,
that's true.
They're very expensive and they're very sought after at the moment. And
really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody wants some company, you know, and some contact and some touch. So people are buying dogs like crazy.
Yep.
Wow.
When this first started, there was a comic with a dog on the ceiling saying, "Oh, not another walk." Like when people were on lockdown and all they could do was go for walks, saying, "I'm tired. I don't want any more." Right?
Yeah, there's quite a concern in the shelters about what happens when people can, when the lockdown is no longer locked down, and what people can go out and hug their neighbors and friends, and will the dogs all come back to the shelters?
Question.
Maybe the people should have a turn in the shelters.
We do kind of have a turn in the shelters.
I was
I
going
mean,
to
not,
say,
you know.
most of the clinic I work with is in shelters if they're lucky.
Really?
Yeah, the folks I work with are mostly a combo of homeless, mentally ill, and substance using.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it's people who are.
So is the number of homeless people in the U.S. increasing?
I would say probably yes.
Because of COVID, you mean?
No, just because of the economy and because of the foreclosures and because of all those things.
Yeah, Seattle
sure.
There's lots and lots of homelessness. I think it also
Yeah.
kind of depends on how people are treated and climate, but yeah, there's lots of homelessness. And it doesn't take much to be homeless. If somebody's living paycheck to paycheck, it's pretty quick.
Right.
Once we're out of you can't evict someone, which at some point will happen, there are probably going to be a huge mass of evictions and people not financially being able to manage it, because a lot of people can't pay rent right now. They're not working.
Right.
Capitalism on parade.
I mean, because this is something that I'm often struck by, that people will go to pounds because they don't want dogs to be homeless, but people can be homeless and they just look the other way.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Corona. And we have more people now here at Earth Haven who have it. And I went to Zach Bush's clinic yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, which was quite fun. I just missed him. He was there the day before, but I didn't get to see him. Mm-hmm.
The clinic in Asheville?
Pardon?
He has a clinic in Asheville?
No, he has a clinic in Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So I drove 6 hours to go, but it was quite fun. And so I was curious when I walked in. They told me to put on a mask because I thought, well, they wouldn't be believing in, germs, or I didn't know. And so I put on a mask. They gave me a mask because mine was in the car and it was pouring down rain. I didn't want to walk out and get it. And, but then when I was so I saw a movement person with a whole new system, which I never even heard of, but I loved it. And anyway, then when I saw the nurse practitioner, she did an 1.5 hour functional medicine intake, I guess, on me. And she didn't, she said she was fine. Was I fine without her wearing a mask? And I said, sure. And could I take my mask off? And she said, sure. And we hugged each other. And at the end, in the lobby. And so then most people weren't wearing masks. And then I got back here and found out that 2 people in the community have it. So I'm just watching myself. And then Rudy, you had something, I was just really explaining the whole thing about how it's not a germ, it's the terrain, in terms of past year's proposal. And then on his deathbed, he said it was the terrain. So I'm just trying to sort all that out again. Because Rudy G, now, so are you saying you did have a virus, or you, how are you processing that?
Well, I would really recommend that anybody else who has questions about this, watch I think it's a 2-hour video on YouTube. I think it's on YouTube, but you go to zachbushmd.com, and it's entitled I think it's called The Human Virome. But it's actually it's a masterful survey historically of what microbes appeared on the earth at what stage, and how they what their impact was on the evolution of life and so forth, and what function they've served. And he does first the microbiome, and then he does at the end, which is apparently a more recent, if I'm getting this right, a more recent advent of the virome. And I think it helps us understand a much larger picture of what microbes and viruses are, and what function they serve in the biosphere, on the planet, and then what function they serve in relationship to us and our health. And I think that's what's really changing now, is this perspective that we got it all wrong in the sense that we got stuck on the idea about pathogenic microorganisms, and this new paradigm talks about how really our our genome, the human genome, does not have the genetic information to make all of the proteins that we require and that we use, because we only have like 25,000 genes, and that's nowhere near enough. And so geneticists were expecting to find hundreds of thousands of genes, and they didn't. It's like, well, what happened? I mean, we have about the same number as a fruit fly, or somewhere between a flea and a fruit fly. So how is that possible? Well, how that's possible is that the bacteria, the fungi, the parasites, all these microbes that inhabit our bodies, they have the needed genome. They have, instead of 25,000, they have hundreds among them, because so many different species, they have hundreds of thousands and millions of genes. And so they use those genes to produce what they're now calling postbiotics, well, instead of prebiotics or probiotics. These are postbiotics. These are substances produced by various microbes in the body that that are essential for us for life. And we knew about 1 or 2 or 3 of these, that certain B vitamins were produced by microbes in the intestinal tract. Yeah, but they've so far discovered something like 20,000 of these of these substances that are made by the microbes that we need in order to be healthy.
Right. So I've got that part, but what I'm curious about is how are you holding? Am I interrupting?
Let me finish. Please let me finish, because it's just part of the picture. But it's important that the picture is in this larger frame, not just the viruses. So they're expecting now to find upwards of 200,000 postbiotics. And so we have 25,000 genes. We can produce 25,000 different proteins, but that's not nearly what we need. So he talks in this video about how the bacteria appeared, and then the fungi and so forth, and what they offered to the creation of health in the human and in other animals as well. So, you know, he talks about the, this is my metaphor, not his, but the body's like a honeycomb. And so our humanness physiologically is the honeycomb, but it's occupied, every little space is occupied by microbes all through the body, not just the intestinal tract. Every tissue of the body has microbes in it, growing and doing their thing, which enables us to function as human beings. Okay, then comes the virome, which is not part of the microbiome, because the microbiome are living creatures. But viruses are not living creatures. They cannot reproduce. They're not alive. They can be put in they can be crystallized and put in a jar, and 10 years later put in some water, and you know they're doing their thing. So what a virus is a package of genetic information, RNA or DNA, with a little coding. And these packages are shuttled around, and they're not just shuttled around within the human being. There are vast swaths of them across the sky. I mean, they've identified these huge highways through which viruses are being blown around in the atmosphere of the planet. And probably, if you study the, what do they call it? Panspermia hypothesis, which is now being more and more accepted. Outside the planet, in space, they're everywhere. And so these vast swaths or streams of viruses are flooding into us and past us and around us all the time. And there are millions, if not billions, of different viruses. So to select one virus and say, okay, this made me sick, seems naive, because they're all swirling around and they're all bringing genetic information that causes us to reprogram ourselves and reprograms how we do everything. And it's like we're living in a soup of these viruses, which means they're available. So we can try this on and try that on and try that on. And this is part of what gives us this capacity for resilience and ability to adapt to changing circumstances. So when there's huge changing circumstances, then the need for more genetic shuffling to try to adjust, like the pollution, all the chemicals in the environment, which could kill us. So we have to learn new ways to do things. So we need this flood of viruses, and we're taking this one and trying it, and that didn't work, we try this. And that's going on a huge scale all the time, but especially now when there's so many environmental pressures, and we have all this electromagnetic pollution that is damaging how we function. Cells can't communicate with each other the way they used to. The mitochondria can't function the way they used to, because the electron flow is being affected by fields, artificial, non-native electromagnetic fields. And all this is putting huge stress on the human body. So the virome is the go-to place to get new things to try to adjust and adapt to this. So you can also just, a parallel piece of reasoning is if you look at the book by Furstenberg, I forget his first name. Anyway, his name is Furstenberg, he's an MD. He wrote a book called history of electricity. No, he wrote a book called The Invisible Rainbow, which is subtitled A History of Electricity and Life. And he has done incredible 20, 30 years he spent doing all the epidemiologic data on when electrification happened rurally in the US, what diseases appeared, and how they appeared in those places. And if that place was 10 years late, then those diseases didn't appear there. And how in the last 100 years or 75 years, every time there's been this massive shift in electromagnetic technology, there has been a pandemic that has been attributed to viruses. So the viruses are in there because we're trying to adjust to this stuff. But does that mean they cause the disease? I mean, how do you make that leap? And you know, so we all think, well, some virologists are studying this, they must know. I don't have to know that. Well, Lynn Margulis, who was the most famous virologist who's no longer living, her comment was, we are our viruses. And people said, what is she talking about? But as you can see, then with all these viruses, and we're trying to adjust, we actually, without our viruses to choose from and try out and reincorporate and all that genetic information, we wouldn't be who we are. And our genome is changing all the time. It always has, it always will. And the raw materials for making those changes are these components, which are little particles of RNA and DNA that are floating around. So how do you argue that they can be disease producing? The way that's set up. I mean, if this view of living, of life, how living organisms operate is correct, that Zach Bush is presenting, which is not his ideas, these are just well accepted scientific concepts now. How do you attribute pathogenesis to these things? How does that make sense? I mean, maybe it does, but how? It doesn't on the face of it seem to make sense. So that's the end of my outburst. But
Linda, you're on mute.
So are you thinking that you kind of took some time off and picked up a package and have integrated it or learned from it, or how are you making sense of this, of your own experience?
Of my own experience, it was clearly, to me, it was not like an illness. I mean, it didn't have the hallmarks of an illness. It had symptoms that kind of came and went that were kind of vague and miscellaneous. And mostly it was, the derangement was psychic, my psyche, that I couldn't think and I couldn't figure. I kept bumping into the walls and I couldn't read because the words were all jumbled up. And, you know, I didn't have a fever, I didn't have a cough, I didn't have anything respiratory. And after it was over, I felt like I've been reprogrammed. So why wouldn't the viruses at this time when we are under such stress, and you know, I'm older, so I can't, I'm an old model. So it takes a lot of new components to make me adjust to all these conditions that we're living in. And that's why I came to Earth Haven, because I couldn't live out in the world. It blows me away. I can't tolerate it. But so I need some viral updating. I mean, I need the viruses and I need to reprogram my genome so that I can function under these crazy circumstances we're living under. And so that's how I make sense of it. It seems like, pardon me?
Did you take your temperature?
I didn't, but Garrow kept checking me with his hand and said, you know, you don't feel hot. I didn't have perspiration, or I didn't.
Okay.
I mean, if I had I could have had a fever, and that could be part of the reprogramming too. But I just don't. I didn't have an identifiable disease. It didn't fit the picture. Though I had miscellaneous things, like I had some pleurisy on the left side that would sort of be there and then be gone, and be there and be gone, and then finally it was gone. And then I had some bowel upset. I had some shooting pains, like right here where the chiropractor's been working on this point for the last 2 or 3 years.
We
And
can't see
it was
the
like
point.
a knife going through there. It was like a knife. Like,
We can't see the point.
And then it would be gone.
Can you tell us the point, because we can't see it?
Hold on just a minute. I lost my hearing aid. Okay, what'd you say, Linda?
We can't see the point. You're pointing at it, but we can't see it.
Oh, oh, that's right. Anyway, it was, okay, maybe I can do that.
Well, you can
Oh,
just tell us. I mean,
Yeah, like right here, and it goes, it went like this, and oh, and then it wouldn't happen again, and then maybe 3 hours later, I go, oh, again, you know. But that's what my symptoms were, that kind of stuff, which, you know, just, I don't think I fit any picture, but in a way I fit a picture if you think of viruses as genetic information and us as needing to be reshaping our genetic makeup to cope with the changes in the environment. Well, then, yeah, that was maybe that's what's happening to everyone. I don't know, because I'm not everyone. I just experienced what I experienced. Mm-hmm. But I know, and Mark, you haven't heard this part, that I was out of my mind and senile and stumbling around for 3 days. And all I could do was sleep. And then I couldn't sleep anymore because I already slept enough. And I was feeling great malaise and like just restlessness and I thought, I feel like I need to go exercise, but I didn't have the energy or the stamina to exercise. So what I did was I remembered that Swamiji wrote a book called Exercise Without Movement, which is basically kind of isometrics. And I thought, well, I can do that. I mean, I got to do something about this. This is not working. And, you know, I'm not without resources. So I will do isometrics. So I started doing that and, you know, tensing up and just holding it for like, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds and then letting go. And that felt really good. Like I would like getting exercise. And so then I did other muscle groups. And then it started becoming what we do on the table for the network chiropractic, which is where we stretch into all these, again, you can't see me, but you stretch into all these strange positions and you can feel the energy just taking over. Well, that started happening. And then it was like every muscle group in my body said, I want some of that too. And so it would come into play, and then that would tighten up and it would stretch me out in this strange position. And I thought, wow, this feels pretty good. But after a while, I thought, well, that's enough. I want to stop. But I couldn't stop because there all these other muscle groups were lined up like, I'm next, I'm next, I'm next. And they weren't, I had no control over it. You know, it was like, okay, go ahead, do your thing. I don't care. And that went on for, I don't know, I estimate an hour or two, but it seemed like a long time. It was in the middle of the night. Wow. And finally, I was just totally exhausted. And so I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I had a wonderful sleep. And when I woke up, I was completely normal. I stood up and I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not, you know, I could think, I could read, I could do everything. It was gone.
Interesting.
So that doesn't sound like an illness. It sounds more like a reprogramming to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, it was fascinating, and I feel very grateful for the experience, and I feel like I definitely feel changed by it, and I definitely feel benefited by it. But I didn't, you know, I also have to confess that early in my in the first day, I had been to my aunt's 100th birthday party, and that's how, quote, I got it supposedly from a cousin. But my aunt, who's 100, she didn't have anything, and so I
Hey, Rudy, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm just going to say goodbye. I have to pop off at 5, and I got to hear this story before, which I'm grateful for. So I'm just going to say goodbye real quick and see you all soon.
Oh, great. It was great to be with you.
Okay, bye.
I'm actually going to have to go in about 5 minutes too. I don't know how long the calls usually are, but I was like 5 minutes or like an hour. Ed had a tooth pulled today, and I'm going to go check on him because he's had a rough day.
I don't have any more to say, so that's great.
Did other folks get sick or have a transformational experience? Or
well, you know, what was interesting is that 8 of my surviving first cousins on my mother's side were there, and 2 were not. But the ones that were there, the people that got sick, were all genetically related, except for one woman who had MS. But everybody else out of the group, there were, you know, spouses and da 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 da. But it was the cousins, the genetically connected people, that all came down with virtually the same syndrome and light, no or light fever, and lasted 2 or 3 days and was gone. And so that's interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah. Oh. Well,
I'm trying to figure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, yeah. Probably that'll give you data for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, friends. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, I've got to go too.
All right.
I got to go too.
All right.
So that's great.
Be well,
thank you.
friends.
Thank you.
And thank you,
Thank you, Arabella.
Thanks, Arabella.
The silent presence. We
exactly.
felt it. Okay, good night.